think we're good to go, guys. Just a reminder to everybody that's joined us. Thank you, first of all, and welcome. And any questions, please enter them in chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Dave Teixeira, who I mentioned is at Bridgepoint, but also on the board of NECCF, and Steve Pappas from Exant. So, guys, take it away. David.
Thank you, John. Thanks for joining everybody. Wanted to kick this off with Stephen. We're going to talk about knowledge management today. Not about why it's important. We all know that. We can skip right over that part. Stephen's got some great ideas on how you can infuse AI into your knowledge management solutions. And we're going to talk about a process to start that discussion. This is not a final discussion. It's kind of setting the table. We're having a follow-up panel on May 6th at our NECCF event to dive into this subject a lot deeper. But with that, Stephen, I will pass the baton to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dave. Welcome, everybody. My name is Steve Pappas. Just a little background on me. I spent many years in knowledge management, over 22 years at this point. I ran most of the Panviva operations, so I have the vendor perspective and the technology perspective, handled all of the Americas, UK, Europe, and chief marketing officer. And then I did multiple large consulting KM strategy gigs with various complex industries. And I learned a lot about where all the white space is in knowledge. And we're going to talk about the white space especially today, because it's the white space where you can go right or you can go wrong. And I'm going to fill all that in for you. Not only am I going to talk about why it's important, but I'm going to give you the tools to fix it. So by the time you walk away, you're actually going to have all of the AI tools that you need, and you don't have to worry about taking notes. You don't have to worry about taking screenshots. You're going to get these slides, which means you're going to get the whole package of what I'm going to talk about today, so you can use it in your own shop. Doesn't matter what AI you use, doesn't matter what system you've got. These are built to help everybody on the knowledge journey. So with that, let me start sharing my screen. All right, let me give you a little bit of the background. I think I'm in full screen now. So what we're really going to talk about is how can you look for the intelligence that exists inside of your business that you're not taking advantage of today. Now, what I mean by that is that we're recording everything. We're recording all the calls. We're recording our meetings. We're recording our Teams and Zoom calls, but we're not mining them properly for all the knowledge assets. And I'm going to go through that, exactly what that means. But we're going to talk about how knowledge is evaporating. No matter what we talk about, we're saying, I can't find it. I can't get access to it. Notes are all over the place, but they're not enough. And then we're going to talk about what happens when people leave. This is a problem. You could talk about the silver tsunami problem of people retiring, all the baby boomers retiring at a ferocious pace this year, next year, and beyond. And you can also look at what happened with the quiet quitting and in general with the elasticity and volatility of workforces that just happen from natural economic changes and things like that. Now, why does AI make this an urgent problem now? And why is it putting a magnifying glass on all of our knowledge? And we're realizing today that knowledge can be dirty. Knowledge can be out of shape. It cannot be fit for purpose. And then all of a sudden, AI is trying to use it, and you're not getting the right answers. It leads to more hallucinations and things like that. Then I'm going to talk about what I've come up with as the conversational knowledge model. How can you get more intelligence out of the things that are already happening? There's nothing, you don't have to go out and buy anything, but they're already happening. Now, how do we take advantage of that? That's the important piece. And then how do we go from transcribing all of that and turning transcription, which technically is noise, into intelligence? And then how do we do that at scale? How do we make sure we're doing that across the enterprise so that whether we're just talking about the contact center, we're talking about sales, or we're talking about any other part of the business, better decisions can be made. People can be up and running much faster. You drastically reduce the time to performance. And then I'm going to walk you through what can you do now, and I'm going to give you 8 extremely valuable KM prompts to get there. So to get started, let's kind of set the stage a little bit. That I'm going to make a statement. Your competitive advantage is evaporating. This is a very sobering statement because it's not coming from the typical places. We would normally think, oh, competitors are moving in. The market, the economy, all of that is affecting us. Yes, it is, but it's evaporating through the fact that we have terabytes and terabytes of voice and recordings, whether it's with our customers, our partners, our internal people, and anyone else in the continuum. It's happening every day, but we're not capturing the intelligence out of it. And I'm going to go through that. So if you look on the right, we're talking about the customer calls. Every objection that has ever come up, every issue that has ever come up, any decision that an agent had to make, or a salesperson or an upsell rep had to make, and the context of it is gone when we hang up. Yes, we've recorded it, but do we mine it properly? We have recordings everywhere. Then we look at the internal meetings. Everyone is having an internal meeting. You're having a huddle, at the end of the day. You're getting folks in conference rooms, and strategy is happening. There's all kinds of knowledge happening at that point. Again, not captured for someone else to benefit from it. Slack threads, Teams, there's thousands and thousands of messages in there. But I just had somebody ask me the other day, that thing you sent me in Teams, can you also send me an email so I can find it easier? What does that tell you? And then we have all of the strategic things that we do when we're planning, when we're sitting and trying to figure out, well, how are we going to handle next quarter, next fiscal year, etc. The reasoning behind it is all the value. Everything we did in that meeting that needs to come through. And by the way, Dave, if there's any point here that you want to interrupt me, or you have a question or anything that would benefit those listening, just let me know.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's put it out there now. 85% of the strategic context that's happening within businesses is gone the moment the meeting ends, right? It's no different than, the 70-20-10 rule in learning. But it's not because we're not doing the right things. We're not having the right meetings. We are going through the motions of what needs to be done, but we're just not capturing it. Think of it as an after call wrap, right? Well, after every meeting, every interaction, all of those things should have an after meeting wrap. And I'm not discussing the thing that comes from, if you use Firefly, if you use Otter, if you use Fathom, or Team's own system. That's bringing you a summarization. It might be bringing you next steps. It may be bringing you action items, not insights into the why, right? So again, we could talk about it from all the different channels, and it's true that 85% is vanishing the minute that meeting ends. And this has become much more of a problem since we're recording everything. what are we doing with those recordings?
So, Steve, you're talking about meetings
Yep.
there, but
Yep.
it's really any media that we're interacting with customers on, right? Could be
Sure.
the customer service call itself, the email that we send, the text that goes back and forth.
Correct. All of it. All of it. And it's interesting because there's an invisible nature to this here, right? The real negative thing about knowledge loss, like that 85%, is that it's silent, right?
Right.
Nobody's getting an alert on it. No dashboard, no executive dashboard turns red and said, hey, you just lost the opportunity to mine all of that data. The meeting ends, everybody goes back to their desk, and then the intelligence just dissolves, right? So, it's not one meeting, it's every meeting, every interaction, every day for years. And then one day you realize that the best rep is leaving and you have no idea how they actually performed something, and it's not, none of that's being fed back in as a real closed loop, right? So let's separate the two, right? What gets captured normally? Action items, meeting summaries, task assignments, who attended. So we'll use the meeting just as one medium here to talk about, and this can be extended into the chat sessions, the AI chat sessions, all of it, right? But what gets lost is the context, why a decision was made, why now, why did they go about it this way, and then all the nuance, the caveats, the concerns, the conditions. How many times have you been in a meeting that said, yeah, we're going to do this, but however, if, right? All the things that come afterwards are never really captured. And then why did we decide something, or why did we reject something? The why. And then, have we solved it before? Have we done this before and we could have avoided redoing it? That's where all that productivity really comes from. So this is kind of, now we're getting to the crux of it, right? The conversational knowledge model. So I break it down into 4 steps, all right? And this is from that raw conversation all the way to how do we get the competitive intelligence out of it easily. Well, there's 4 simple steps. The first one is capture, right? This is where all that high value conversation happens. All those great questions, those great answers, how a rep handled something at the highest level, how did they, take the wind out of the sails, so to speak. Sometimes we pass them on in the huddle. Sometimes we take advantage of these things through our workforce management, et cetera. But we're not getting all of that value. So which of those conversations have the most strategic value, right? Are they sales calls, upsell calls, problem support calls, maybe internally the strategy sessions, or when we talk to the subject matter expert? Or is it the customer verbatims, the voice of the customer, when they need to escalate? How valuable are those? And the second area is, how do we easily extract all of this, right? How do we pull out all that value and the reasoning and the trade-offs and the context? It's not about summaries, not about structured intelligence. It's really the what happened and what was the result. What was the question? What was the answer? And how did we get there, right? What was the value taken out of it? And 3 is then, how do we now structure this? Because we can't just go around and have everybody reading AI Markdown. We have to transform this intelligence into something that is easily reusable, accessible, searchable, taggable, and is an asset that everyone can use. Now, these days, when I talk about everyone, I don't just talk about the human everyone. I'm talking about the digital everyone as well as the AI everyone. And, I say it's important for AI, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but most of the time we need an answer. We don't necessarily need a chapter of a book. I always say, if you want an answer, from your friend, do you want to have them read you the first chapter of the book, or do you want them to just give you the answer? Well, we are forcing AI now to be reading through large volumes of information. And I'll give you a clue. AI does not like reading documents because it's summarizing as it goes. So if you summarize chapter 1 and something different happens in chapter 2, it already has the summarization. It's not making the shift necessary. So if you're forcing it to read an entire document and to summarize an entire document, you're running into potential problems. AI prefers, and I do have an article coming out on this. I interviewed 4 different AI systems about how they prefer to reason over information, and all 4 were unanimous. We prefer to reason over structured knowledge objects, not documents. So there's an important distinction there just to keep in the back of your head. And then now we've got to activate it. We've got to give it to somebody to use it. We've got to feed our agents, our reps, our salespeople, or our AI systems. So now we need a deployable model or something we could deploy for them to use and benefit by, right?
So, Stephen, where do you see this? Where do you see this function sit in businesses today?
So let's talk about that for a second, because that's probably a good place. And there's kind of a clear breakdown of this, because this conversational knowledge model is generally in a more center of excellence area. If it's in, let's just take the contact center as an example, right? This can live in a center of excellence that's developed for the knowledge, for the training, for the QA, for the workforce functions. And generally, there will be the analyst types that are using this to move forward with things. And it's the people that you develop, and it doesn't have to be 5 people full time type of a thing. It could be the folks already involved in knowledge. It could be the folks involved in quality or training, but it has to be somebody that's thinking about mining for intelligence. Once you mine a lot of it, then it's just incremental after that, right? So diving in a little bit deeper, just making the point, I'm not going to take a lot of time on this, is that transcription by itself is just noise. I mean, if you've ever looked at raw transcription, it's just a massive text file, right? It's not even Markdown, which is AI output. So it's just noise. But once you determine all of the patterns, the things that are occurring more often, the same way that somebody asked this particular question, or maybe many people asked that question, but they asked it differently. When that can be now viewed as a pattern and it's structured, now you can extract it properly, right? So we want to look at the patterns and then turn those signals, right, those things that it learns, into more strategic information. This becomes the intelligence to inform the next person or train the next agent. Or maybe it's the system that is feeding the AI assistant. So now, how do we do this at scale? This is kind of one of the questions that people will ask more often is, how do you start to institute this at scale and create this memory? Think of it as a second brain. It remembers every objection, every issue, every question, and the answer, and how you got there, every win, every upsell, or every decision made at scale. So we're not talking about something like a wiki, right? We are talking about something that is truly a knowledge base that can be reusable for others, right? That's the, think of that as the living system, right? That is continuously being augmented every time another conversation happens, and it can be easily done. And I'm going to give you the prompts to do it, right? So if we look at it from an every objection, you want AI to know what that objection was, what that issue was, how did that enter in? How did they ask that question, right? And sometimes it's the how they asked the question that's very valuable, not just how we answered it. That you'll get more mileage out of it. Then we could look at from every successful interaction, every satisfied client or customer, right? Who are the top folks that are doing it right? How do we determine patterns in how they handled something so that others can learn from that? So, back to Dave's question, who feeds that back in for coaching opportunities or for, hey, by the way, we've updated our knowledge base, access it now, and we have how top deals were handled or how top questions were answered, etc. Right? And then every decision that is made, how do we make sure that we don't have to make that same decision again because we forgot how we did it last? Always, the next time it occurs, how do we make sure of that? Right? And that way we can reduce down our knowledge loss. You can almost never eradicate knowledge loss, but you can reduce it down as close to zero as possible. So when someone leaves, let's say somebody's retiring or they hit the lottery and they're out of there, but they've been there for 10 years and they know all the nuances through experience and expertise as to how to manage that process that they do day to day. Well, we could teach the mechanics to someone else, but we can't really pass on experience. You can't pass on expertise with a USB cable from one person's head to the other. I'm going to show you how you can do that. And you can reduce the knowledge loss because if you think about what happens, you have to mitigate change. Well, you also have to mitigate knowledge loss. I bet if you could think about it, you've had occurrences in your career where people have left, and then all of a sudden you're saying, should I call that person to find out how they did that? Does anybody else know how to do this? Did anybody watch them do that thing? Those kinds of questions it's a process problem immediately, but you can mitigate that. You can smooth it out so that it's not that problematic down the road. All right. So now let's talk about speed for a second. We're specifically going to talk about speed of competency. Now, whether or not in your business you have people get up to a competent level to be able to do the job that you've hired and you're investing in them and their training to full productivity, we'll just use an example. Maybe it's 6 to 9 months. With conversational knowledge management, you can reduce that to weeks. Why? Because you might have a new hire in training, then they come out, they shadow someone, they nest for a little while. Maybe they learn some bad habits too. They look at that binder that person created from information that was 2 years old and things have already changed, right? They might make some very expensive mistakes, but that's, the price we pay. They're going to probably ask the same questions that were asked and answered by the last person or last year or the previous year. And they really only get to that full productivity when there's been enough tribal knowledge transfer, right? Now, what happens then if they leave? Where are you? Right? You're calling HR and you're saying, hey, you got to post it again. But meanwhile, you invested a lot of time, effort, and money in that person, And if they don't have the tools or they leave for 10 cents more, whatever the case is, now all of a sudden there is a drop in that level of productivity. So, or timing. And now you're without the person. But if you look at the using conversational knowledge management, the new hire that comes in could have access to every relevant conversation from day one. And I don't mean listening to the conversations. I don't mean learning from the recordings. I mean access to the insights from those conversations. The Q&A, the FAQs can all be derived very quickly, and they can see, well, how did the best people handle that last time or handle this particular case? Whether you're doing scenario-based training or you're doing other types of training, they still have access to that while they're on the job or while they're in training. So by understanding the why, you get these people productive in a matter of weeks, not months and quarters, etc. And then the knowledge stays. So one premise to always have is knowledge should live on beyond the employee, because knowledge is an asset of the business. If I said, why are you a world-class organization? It usually boils down to we have great products, great people, etc. But it's a lot of times it's the how you do the things you do, right? The how, the why. Why are you world class? It's how you handle things and how you treat the customer, and how do you handle all of those aspects. That should be documented knowledge that everyone can draw from, all that experience in the future.
So, Steve, one of the things that I see a lot is
Yep.
when we go into places that have high turnover,
Yep.
oftentimes it's because this piece of the infrastructure is lacking. It's not a good knowledge base, which makes it hard to train, it just makes the job tough for agents. Is that something that you see out in the field?
If there's no knowledge base, well, there's a couple of things there.
Or not even no knowledge base, just it's a tough environment and
Yep.
the knowledge base isn't quite as good as it could be.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it's not a case of you got to spend $1 million either, right?
Right.
It's a case of you've got to know where the knowledge is. I see too many organizations, and I've run into this many times. Hundreds of healthcare, hundreds of financial services, manufacturing, roadside assistance, you name it. And a lot of times you run in there and people feel like, well, we've got it all. Yeah, we've been building it over the last few years. We have it. It's in a wiki or it's in something. It's in a shared drive. People draw from that. Well, the problem is the minute you hit save on knowledge, it's probably out of date, right? So you've got to take that into consideration, that you're always working one generation behind on knowledge. Then you start to look at the fact that, okay, we've got to get people up to speed. So we put them in training. They get all that knowledge. They get the binder, or they get the ring bound document and stuff like that. And they have to watch the videos, whatever scenario you've got. And then they go out. Then they're out on the floor. Now they might nest a little bit, or they're kind of let loose. And what's their on-the-job system? So if I tell you, I can walk into a contact center and I can look around in 90 seconds and tell you where the problems are. I look for clues. I look for sticky notes. I look for documents pinned onto the cubes. I look for binder holders. I look for the plastic covered documents that they're flipping through. And I look for all of those scenarios, and it tells me that there's either no knowledge base or no trusted knowledge base. There's a huge difference there, because an employee needs to feel like I'm going to be able to find the knowledge when I need it because my metrics are on the line. And I can tell you, I worked with Blue Cross Blue Shield a number of years back, and they found that almost 30% of average handle time was spent searching for knowledge, searching for answers.
It's a big number.
Absolutely. And then sometimes when you get there, all of a sudden you've got to read through a narrative first before the first click here, say this, do that, right? Knowledge has to be built in a need to know first, nice to know back, right? Always layered like that. And knowledge should always be built in the actionable. In the heat of battle, when an employee is handling an issue for a customer, they don't want to have to read through 2 or 3 paragraphs. They want the answer to surface itself fast, see it, click here, go to this field, open this, say this, right? They need everything in the actionable, which is always in a verb noun combination, right? And like I said, you don't have to spend $1 million to have this system. You can do it with tools you might already have. And if you say, well, I want to grow into that down the road, great, that's fine. But there are key things to understand with this. And that's where you start to accelerate things. And I'm going to make a statement here. When it comes to knowledge, we are not solving a knowledge problem. We are solving the problem of time. Once again, this is not a knowledge problem. You might have knowledge all over the place. You might have things written everywhere, but it's not solving your basic root cause problem. That is time. How much time does it take you to get to it? How much time do you have to put them on hold? What's the silence in the call? How are you searching through systems, multiple systems in some industries, and asking your neighbor, doing the gopher head popping up over the cube, putting your hand up for a supervisor, texting on Teams to the escalation or help desk, right? All of that is time. So what we're really solving is time, if you think about it.
And time is money.
Time is huge money. I worked with a financial services company that said, 1 second of AHT equates to $500,000 savings. Big company, but to them, every second counts. All right. So we talked about knowledge has to either be compounded and accessed and used, or you run the risk of it evaporating. So every conversation makes your team smarter. I'm sure you'll agree with that. Every conversation that has been recorded has the ability to make your team much smarter. New hires can now inherit that expertise, that experience level from the person before them that may have been doing it for 20 years and just left because they're able to retire and garden and travel and do all that stuff. AI looks at that compounded information and it gets better at giving you better information. It can generate better for you, right? Because every interaction is captured. You can point AI internally to that information. And additionally, because you're getting better inside, your competitive advantage is going to grow. Okay, so are we ready for a completely different thing to start to get the how? All right, let's continue.
Yes.
So I'm gonna give you 8 of the best prompts for what I consider every business leader, especially if you're dealing with process and you're going and embarking on a KM journey or any type of knowledge journey, whether you're doing it in a knowledge management, an AI knowledge management system, or you're going to start off with baby steps using what you've got internally. These are all platform agnostic. It doesn't worry about where you're going to put the information. It'll work with any AI tool, and you really don't have to have a lot of knowledge management expertise to get started. So these are the 8 prompts I'm going to go through, and you're going to get them so you can copy and paste easier. We're going to talk about knowledge loss. Knowledge loss is absolutely critical for you to know where your baseline is, right? How to understand, if I lose 3 people to retirements in 2026, what am I looking at? What is the effect of that on the business? Then we're going to look at, well, what's the critical knowledge? How do we identify the important stuff? Then we're going to look at the tribal knowledge detector. What's the tacit versus explicit detector? We're going to look at the visibility gap. Where are the gaps in the knowledge that we've got? And you can point AI to it, have it evaluate it, and understand that, but analyze it. Then I think one of the most important ones is, how do we get the knowledge out of people's heads before they leave, or before they retire, before they win the lottery, right? So subject matter expert knowledge extraction. That's the old putting the USB cable from one person's head to the next and saying, hey, give me all your knowledge, right? There are easy ways to just interview the person, record the interview, and say, maybe they run payroll. I'll just give an example. They run payroll on the 15th of the month. What are the steps that you take? Talk about, how do you do it? What system? What do you put in which fields, etc.? And then the system will actually extract that knowledge and turn it into a standard operating procedure, right? Then a KM roadmap. Well, help me put together the journey of KM map in front of me or in front of my executives. And then let's look at, well, how do we figure out where the value is in what we're doing? Sometimes we need that because somebody's going to say, hey, what are you doing with this knowledge stuff? Well, let's figure it out. Let's do it to the penny if we can. And then let's look at creating executive summaries and pointing out the red flags in where is the knowledge not sufficing for our organization. Okay, so let's look at how would we use this. Now, these 8 are taken from our ebook. We have 37 prompts built for this, and if that's something you'd like to talk about, you can send us an email. Email's on the screen at the bottom on every slide. Now, first, what you have to do is you've got to do this assessment. So you've got to understand that most of the time, these KM projects will fail only because teams skip that diagnostic or discovery part. And then they go right to, hey, let's buy some software, right? And shiny new toy is great. I love it. I've sold it many times. But the real work, because a lot of times knowledge is not necessarily someone's, second nature to everyone. Understanding, doing the diagnostics, doing the discovery of what you need, what is right for your organization, before you say, hey, we're going to bring in some different software vendors and we're going to do some vendor education and learn from them. Let me tell you, everything happens better if you understand where your organization is in the knowledge journey. And because sometimes you could be calling those vendors in way too early and you don't have the right understanding yet. So these prompts will help you assess and understand the landscape internally first, right? And then they're sequenced, right? They're in a logical order. First we diagnose, then we look at what's important, then we put a plan together, and then we prove the value. It's very straightforward and simple, and anyone in the organization can grab onto that. And you can use them out of order when you need, but in general, the first time through, go through them sequentially. Now, this, as I said earlier, it's platform independent. Whether you guys use ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, name your favorite AI tool, these will work. These prompts are built to be universal, so they'll work in all of them. And ideally, it'll help you think through these things. So now you've got the knowledge. And let me tell you, when you're talking to vendors down the road, or you're trying to do it yourself, having the knowledge in-house is so much better, right? And then we have some that are designed specifically for executives to be able to help them with decisions, not just to add more transcripts, add more terabytes of storage, help with decisions, right? Every prompt produces something that you can conceivably show to a senior leader. Okay, let's jump into it. The way these are structured, they're structured with the prompt on the left here. Analyze the following information to identify knowledge loss risk. And they'll tell you that this is, it will look at the people, the process, the structure, and to some degree the technology, but where is the risk, right? Where is the risk for knowledge being lost due to turnover, retirement, or role change? So, first it'll diagnose, then it'll prescribe. And like I say, you can't fix what you haven't found. So this is the starting point to give you your baseline. And it works on any input. You can paste in meeting notes, transcripts, process descriptions. All of that is fair game, right? It will understand those things. Or you could say, I'm going to interview the head of that department about knowledge loss. Tell me about what changes are happening that you expect. How many retirements? What's the average, pay in there? What are the role changes? Are you expecting any reductions to come up, right? Do you have anything that you know of? And all you have to do is take that transcript and attach it with this prompt. Simple, right? Okay, number 2, we're going to go through critical knowledge identification. So this is where we start to separate noise from valuable information, right? What are the knowledge areas? I mean, this is kind of mission critical, right? Things halt without looking at understanding the knowledge that is important and capturing it immediately, right? And then you can look at what's next level. Important, but it can be replaced. And third, it's the nice to have. It's low on the totem pole. We can address it later and look at it later. So this will produce it in a way that the mission critical stuff will be up front, the absolute need, then the next level, and then of course the low urgency. So this is also trying to stratify a prioritization list. Maybe you don't know where to start in knowledge. You say, well, I really don't know where we start. This will help you identify these are the things, it may be the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the calls come in and it's 20% of the questions that get asked. But those are mission critical because they're done all the time. You may then make a decision down the road to say, gee, they might be important or nice to haves. We want to deflect some calls to a chatbot or AI bot. Well, now if you stratify these, you can start to say, we know which ones to be able to push to deflect off to a digital or AI method, right? So see how we're building on this? Okay, so understanding the difference, understanding the knowledge that's undocumented or the knowledge that's inside of the heads of the people that know it, right? And they know it cold because they've done it for so long. That's where this detector will start to look at that. And it's easiest to use an interview, You can just interview the subject matter expert around, how they do a certain thing. And, if it's a process, it will identify as a walkthrough. If it's something that you have to do step 1, 2, 3, it will come out as a task list or a checklist. And then if it's something that's much more narrative or scenario based, it will come out as a story style, right? Which could go back into your training as scenario based training. Okay. Important here is the knowledge visibility, and I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit. You're going to get these, but I want you to understand well why they're here and why they're created for you to use. So this is understanding the gap analysis, right? Every time you say go ask a certain person, I use the ask Sarah moment, right? That costs because now you've got two people actually doing something for the same purpose. So the cost doubles when you have to ask the right person. Now, when knowledge really isn't visible and people can start guessing, that's where we have other costs involved and we have other problems because customers might see it. This is also where getting people to full productivity is visible. This reveals kind of the map, not where the information is, but where people can go to get the answers. And it's all in plain language. Here's my favorite subject matter knowledge extraction process. This is to identify, and you can change these things too, right? When you use these, you might find I don't want to know about decisions here in number one. I want to know about identify, key questions that the subject matter expert regularly takes. So you can customize these as you need. As you use them, you'll find that you'll add to them or you'll amend them a little bit, right? But this is, record a 15, 20, 30-minute conversation that you have with the subject matter expert about what they do, how they do it, and especially when they make those experience level judgment calls, that's the stuff you want to capture. And it won't generalize. It absolutely does not want to generalize. It wants the instructions to come out. How can I give this to the next person that's going to be doing that job so they can do it and learn from the experience and expertise of their predecessor, right? And
So, Steve, when you look at 1 through 5, which one's the most important? Which one gives you the biggest return?
On 1 through 5 are these prompts.
These prompts.
So number one,
which one's the most eye-opening?
Yeah, number one is the one that's going to open your eyes first, because nobody really realizes how much is lost when it comes to knowledge when people move.
Yep.
They might move to another department, they might leave, they might retire, etc. That's the eye-opening one. And then making sure you're capturing the knowledge from the people before they leave, this would be absolutely a very close second. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Yep.
That is perfect.
So here's the roadmap generator. Somebody will ask you this. So I put this one in here because I know that's what happens, and this helps you on a 30, 60, 90 day what needs to be done and what are expected outcomes. And then the knowledge management value realization calculator. Somebody will ask, usually somebody in the CFO's office, how this is helping, where the reductions are, how much faster can we get, where are we searching and getting better at things. And then, of course, the red flag one for executives. This really produces an executive-ready summary of all the knowledge risks, which is another very important one, because somebody might need to fund this activity or that technology you might think about in the future, and you want to be able to figure out how to feed this and create this as a synthesized way to have everything that you've learned and why it's important now, and do it in executive speak so that it can be presented as a 1 or 2 page red flag indicator, not another spreadsheet to an executive, right? So you see the sequences. 1, 2, and 3 are the assess phase. 4, 5, and 6 are the act phase, and 7 and 8 are the prove phase. And as I said, if you want access to others, you can just send us an email. There's 37 in this library, but I handpicked the important ones for you. And
So this is the systematic way to go about making your knowledge better.
Yep. And no matter what you're using, no matter whether you decide to move into a knowledge management technology or an AI knowledge management technology, or you're using it with what you have today and then maybe upgrading down the road, right?
But it's also a way to show marketing and product and operations why this is important and how it's impacting the entire
Correct.
business.
And that's a good point, because not only are you showing them that, but you're getting their buy-in, because you're going to need information from them. You're going to eventually need them to contribute. You may even want to interview some of them, because you've got to get something out of the data silo that they might control or might own. So it's important to use these prompts with real content. Don't sanitize it. You don't want to put summaries in there from your meetings. You want to put the transcript. Let AI see the raw, right? The summarization is already polished up. It's already been, kind of synthesized in a way. You don't want to use summaries, so you want to use real content. Use any tool that you use in the organization, or you own, or you prefer, and the outputs are for business leaders, department leaders, etc. You're not going to get just documentation out of this. That's not the goal. The goal is to give you real working blueprint type of information, and then you can just keep running them. Run them as things change in the organization. KM is not something static. It's not a one and done. It's something that needs to be done on a periodic basis, because the business always changes. You might want to rerun the risk scanner every quarter, and the SME extraction every time you hear someone is thinking of leaving. I mean, remember those 2 weeks when somebody gives a 2-week notice? What do? You either have somebody sit with them, or you ask them to write down everything that they do. Neither of those really work.
Nope.
Well,
They
extract
don't
the
work.
information. Yeah, extract the
We all
information
know
from
that.
them properly, and capture it, and you'll have it forever.
And I just had one last question too.
Yeah.
We do this all the time. We sit with people and say, I need some help. I'm trying to make things better.
Yep.
And I always go to, this is the most important piece that there is, because it affects everything. It's the foundation. If it's broken, you can train people better, but if knowledge is broken, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
In my opinion.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the magnifying glass is now over organizations' knowledge because of AI. If AI is not working properly, it's usually because it's looking at something that has not been conditioned properly, or it's something that's not in good shape that AI can work with it. And that's going to be key, because, over the next few years, we're all going to be using AI. There's no getting around it. But getting things ready for AI to be able to do its job properly, that's going to be key. And that's what's showing the warts even more so today.
Right. And we keep hearing about agentic AI, and agentic AI in theory is nice.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you have 1, 2, 300, or 1, 2, or 5 people in a call center and they do things differently, agentic is just going to take a summary of different things, which isn't great for the business.
Right. And agentic AI, means you've got, agents running specific tasks, pulling data from a certain place. And if they're pulling data that is not fit for purpose, guess what happens to that task, right?
Right.
So, and they're running all the time, and agents talk to agents, and it just gets compounded how much worse if that foundational information is not set properly. The data is cleansed. There are no duplicates. There are no broken links. There are no potentials for AI to stumble over itself. It's not just giving them narrative, it's giving them knowledge objects that they like, that they can operate and reason on easily. So there's a lot of reasons to get knowledge under control these days. And I'll be the first to admit, if I said, hey, you got to clean out the garage in the spring, I got all my winter stuff in there, my snowblower and everything. Nobody wants to clean out the garage, but how much better it'll be once you do clean out the garage. This is one of those clean out the garage times.
Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you very much. This was super informative. And if anybody wants to take Steve up on his offer here, he's more than happy to discuss his process and his tech. He's done a great job. He's got years of experience. Take advantage of it. His website's here. His email's here.
Yep.
And thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure, Dave. My pleasure. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And hopefully we'll get to chat in the future.
Any other questions, John? Or
no, just some comments about, the need for, a different quality of person, analytical skills, thinking, tired phrase, but outside the box in terms of, like Steve talked about, where is that data? How am I gathering that data, and enriching that knowledge base? So it's an opportunity that AI creates for a higher level position, I think, in some ways. So good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
thank you
Take care.
all.